Number 2, the Hanging Parry. So, first, let's talk about how to execute the Hanging Parry. First off, we raise our hands into Fenestra, and in this position, we want our hilt at about eye level. We want our blade pointed forward, down at the ground, and across the line. And if you do this correctly, when the opponent's sword impacts your sword, it'll slide down the length of your blade and keep your body safe. So, as we did before, let's take a look at what Fiore has to say about Fenestra and how we want to implement those. So, he tells us, I am always ready for the whole art. She is a master at covering and striking. She is the master of covering and striking with all the guards. She makes her disputes. Right? So again, like with Corona, we're being told over and over again, this guard is really good at protecting yourself. Now, this isn't the only thing he has to say about the guard. Fiore has a lot of positive things to say about Fenestra, but this is one of the common threads, which is that she is always ready to defend you, a master at covering and striking, right? So you can defend and attack from this guard, and that it can cover the whole art. Cuts, thrusts, grappling, the entire thing. You can protect yourself from Fenestra. So we know our hypothesis from looking at the art here, and it makes sense that Fenestra is the guard that we're moving into based on the information Fiore gives us. So, let's talk about the Hanging Parry. How do we get there? Well, what's interesting about the Hanging Parry is there are essentially two different types of Hanging Parries that you can execute, and you can get there in two different ways. So the first one is the preemptive parry, right? Which is, you can think of that as the same way that you would execute a static parry, where you see their blow coming in, and so you move your sword into a position to protect yourself. In this case, it's like their sword's coming down at you, so you raise your hands, get behind your sword, and then they slide off your blade. The second way to do this is actually from the bind, right? So this is where our swords make contact on each other, and if you feel them pushing and pressuring you, you can yield to that pressure and raise your hands while you're in the bind, and the pressure that they're giving will push their sword past you and down your blade that is now pointed at the ground, giving you a tempo to act in whatever way you want to do. Things to think about: how do we execute this Hanging Parry? Where can we do it from? From when we look at guards, you can pretty much execute this parry from almost any guard. Realistically, the two that you cannot do a Hanging Parry from in a single tempo is Donna on the right or left. Right? The advantage of this action comes from raising your hands up to your head and having the point in front of you. So the reason you can't do it from Donna is because Donna already has your hands high, right? Your sword is on your shoulder, and also the point is behind you. So you cannot get the action of raising your hands to get the blade in front of you because your hands are already up and the sword is behind you. This parry is best done, right? As I said, you can do this from anything, but if you're not doing it from the bind and you're transitioning from one guard into another to do this parry, it's best done when your sword is already in a point forward guard, right? So if you're in Longa, if you're in Breve, if you're in Chingale, being able to simply raise your hand and not have to change the angle of the sword makes it a lot smoother than if you're in, say, Iron Gate, where your sword is already offline, right? You have additional movement you need to make to get the sword closer to the online position. It's going to take a little bit longer, but it still works out just fine. So, what is our follow-up action from here? Well, it's relatively easy. As the sword slides down, we rotate our sword in a manner of a stramazzone or a moulinet and cut right back down onto them. We can see this in the play that this is taken from, which is the Colpo di Villano, where their sword is sliding down, and you're just going to rotate your wrists and cut right back down. Generally, you're going to make the rotation on the right or the left, and that's going to be driven by where your hand position is based on how their cut came in. So, again, we'll look at the plays together, right? We can see here our opponent's sword is sliding down our cover, and then, in this case, we've taken a passing step off the line and cut right back down onto their arms. So, other sources. Does the Hanging Parry continue to exist later? Well, we can see Tull Hoffer, who's writing a little bit later than Fiore. Tull Hoffer loves the Hanging Parry. It is all over his text. He shows it in tons of different ways, tons of different angles, a variety of different weapons. And here we can see he shows it with the sword alone, with the sword and buckler. Here it is again with the sword on horse. If you dig into his source, he's really into the Hanging Parry for whatever reason. We can see he shows it certainly more often than Fiore does, but it is often tied to the same or similar plays that Fiore is giving us. Right, we can see on the far left here, our fencer is about to execute the Ligadora Mezzana. You can see on the far right, this is straight out of Fiore as well, on the horseback. So he is very into the Hanging Parry. Other systems, we can see this in Lukeckner in Germany, who's writing mostly about the Messer. We also see it in the Goliath, which is part of the Lichtenauer tradition. The Hanging Parry is very common throughout these systems. Later on, we also see a partial Hanging Parry make an appearance within the military saber systems and backsword systems, though they're slightly different because generally the sword is held more horizontal over your head, generally the Guard of St. George, and depending on the system, sometimes you take it as a static parry and sometimes you take it as a hanging parry, and it just kind of depends.